Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 32 of Real Stories. Today we'll be getting into 3 supernatural tales. But before we get into that, make sure that if you have a story that you would like to hear on the show, please email it to me at thearspodcast@gmail.com. That's thearspodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you're big on YouTube, you can check out our YouTube channel where I post the podcast there as well. I'm still in the process of uploading all the episodes, but there's a decent amount on there right now, so check out the YouTube channel for more. And without any further ado, let's get started. This happened when I was only around 8 or 9 years old. My father and I went to Duke's Farm in New Jersey for a Cub Scout event. After the event, we walked around the estate with a friend and his father. We were walking by the stables, and there was this mansion, which is now removed, behind these gates. We all decided it would be fun to see what it was all about, so we went past the gates. I started getting this anxious feeling when we entered the gates, but I presumed it was from entering a restricted area and not wanting to break the rules. As we got closer to this mansion, I get this horrifying feeling of terror and start crying and begging my dad to leave. At the time, I didn't know why this was happening, and I was scared for my life. Years later, my father tells me his experience from that day. According to him, he froze in fear as well. He described it as, quote, evil entering him, and apparently told the evil, quote, I am a follower of God. He will protect me. He was scared as well, but not as worried as I was. We got out of there as quickly as we could and kind of brushed the experience off. He didn't want to tell me this until a few years ago because he didn't want to scare me as a child. I've never been crazy into religion, and I'm very skeptical when it comes to paranormal experiences like this, but this experience was very real to me and opened my eyes to what might be out there. Ooh, this is a really creepy story. I really liked it because it's kind of unexplainable, but I like that it wasn't just the kid who felt something, it was the dad as well. So in this story, our author, when they were about 8 or 9, was at a farm. And when they were at this farm, they were walking around and there was a mansion there behind big gates. And they decided that they should, go check it out and explore. But as soon as they started past these gates, our author started feeling really uneasy. And they thought that, maybe they were just like a goody two-shoes at the time and, they're breaking a rule that says, not to enter there. So they're like, maybe it was that. Sometimes when you're doing something a little bit sketchy, borderline illegal, you get an anxious feeling. Very valid to have. However, they then get a feeling of like outright terror and they start crying and begging their dad to leave. And they didn't know what was going on at the time because that is a little bit more, obviously, than you just standard anxiety from doing something that you shouldn't be doing. However, their father just kind of brushed it off at the time and they got out of there. But years later, now that they're older and are able to not be as afraid of something, their dad tells them how he felt at the time and that he felt like he was almost being possessed. He described it as evil entering him and apparently trying to defend himself and, his child from that evil by saying that he was a follower of God and that, God would protect him. And he was very scared as well. It's just crazy because it sounds like something was really happening to them and that maybe this declaration of his, God following, it protected them and kept whatever evil it was from following them. I'm also not super religious. Our author says that as well. But this seems pretty hard to deny, even if you're not religious or into the paranormal. Like, how do you explain that? The kid being nervous about going there someplace they shouldn't is understandable. But when the dad says he's afraid and says he feels the evil around him, maybe there was a reason that that place was restricted. Maybe it wasn't just standard reasons of private property. Maybe it's because there's entities on the property and they're malicious. So, also a little backstory. So they were at the Duke's farm in New Jersey, and apparently Doris Duke ran a male friend of hers over with her car at the mansion gates. She claimed it was an accident, but many people believed it was an intentional act, as he had told her he was leaving, and that made her furious and jealous. Doris was known to be cruel to her help and to others around her, and perhaps a vengeful spirit or malevolent force is attached to the property. I mean, that sounds pretty valid. That was in the comments, so shout out to that user for adding a little bit more context to the story. Yeah, it sounds like people were wronged and have a reason to be upset, and maybe these negative feelings are causing their spirits to just linger around the property and take it out on whoever's in the area. That's plausible. I can understand why spirits would be upset about that, so it definitely makes you think, and I love a story like that. We'll get back to more supernatural tales right after this word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. Hey guys, the start of the new year can be stressful. There's a lot of things going on. The weather's kind of crazy. There's holidays and new beginnings. And all of that could be overwhelming. So if you might be feeling overwhelmed, depressed, stressed, or anxious, today's sponsor, BetterHelp, is here to help you. BetterHelp offers licensed therapists who are trained to listen and help you. You can talk to your therapist in an online environment at your convenience. And there is a broad range of expertise in their network of over 20,000 therapists that give you access to help that may not be available in your area. You just fill out a quick questionnaire to help assess your specific needs, and you get matched with a therapist in as little as 48 hours. You can then schedule video and phone sessions, plus you can exchange unlimited messages with your therapist. You can request a new therapist at any time with no additional charges. So join the 3 million plus people who have taken charge of their mental health with an experienced BetterHelp therapist. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/realstories. That's betterhelp.com/realstories. All one word. What better way to start off the new year than by getting your mental health in order? It's so important, guys. So start today with BetterHelp. Now, let's get back to the show. Less than 2 years ago, I was in North Carolina near Camp Lejeune. I found a spot of land to meditate and smoke some cannabis peacefully. A few months prior, I had died in my sleep and had an after-death experience in which I experienced a large hand coming from an opening of clouds, as I floated in such a way that my body truly could not manage it on its own. I felt such a bliss, like the other half of me had been found at long last. I stopped halfway there and thought that I did not want to leave my mother with another dead child. I did not want her to grieve. As I reflected on all of this, I began to nag myself in my head. Get up, stop, get up, and go. It was raining pretty hard, actually. I was gazing at a spider in a web as my mind nagged myself. I was comfortable on the remote muddy trail and did not want to move. Then, a voice in my head that I clearly did not think was myself came from the upper right side of my mind. This voice said, "Didn't you say you did not want your mother to grieve?" That shook me because I knew I didn't think that thought. I got up and left the trail, irritable, thinking it was all for naught. Not even 10 seconds on the main road, a big Jeep filled with a few Marines lifted with bikes on the back intent on mudding, barreled past me and onto the path. I would not have seen it, and I would have been squashed like a pancake and killed instantly. Any thoughts, ideas, suggestions? This is one of the many major spiritual events that have happened to me during my life. Ooh, that was an interesting story. I liked it because it was different than a lot of the other stories that we read. So this person was off just kind of exploring, chilling, and smoking. And a few months prior, they had a weird near-death experience where they technically died in their sleep. And they experienced a large hand coming from an opening in the clouds. So that is pretty crazy. Like a large hand opening from the clouds, that's definitely like some heavenly vibes. So, I mean, that's maybe something to look forward to if that exists. But she felt like she was floating away from her body, and she felt very blissful in this experience. But she stopped halfway up towards the cloud because she didn't want her mom to grieve another dead child. And I mean, that's really selfless of her. So I respect it because, you don't want your parents to have to grieve you. Your parents aren't supposed to bury their kids. That's normally how that goes. But yeah, so she had that experience. And as she sat near Camp Lejeune, which is a big space to avoid because they had a lot of issues. There's been a ton of anti-Camp Lejeune stuff because people were exposed to chemicals and I guess getting cancer or something. But that's a big thing in Northeast Ohio, was they had all these signs for if you were a victim at Camp Lejeune or something like that. So very interesting tie-in. But anyways, she's sitting there reflecting on this near-death experience, and her mind is just kind of wandering, and she was comfortable just sitting on this remote muddy trail, and she didn't want to move. Then a random voice in her head that wasn't her own kind of says, "Didn't you just say you didn't want your mother to grieve?" As if you're doing something that might cause your demise. So she was shook by that, understandably so, and she got up and left. And not even 10 seconds later on the main road, a big Jeep filled with Marines barreled past her onto the path. So basically that voice told her to get up and move. And if she wouldn't have did that, she said she wouldn't have seen that van coming and she might have been ran over. So just a very interesting story about maybe a little guardian angel voice in her head. But I don't really know what to make of that. What do you guys think about that? It seems like something told her to move because she was supposed to be here. So it's really interesting when things like that happen. And I wonder why that happens for some people, but it doesn't for others. I wonder if before people die in a lot of weird accidents or whatever, they get a voice that says that and maybe they ignore it or what. So I'm not sure, but definitely a very interesting story. A month ago, I had to deal with probably the hardest passing I've ever had to deal with up until this point in my life. My once best friend and ex-fiance overdosed on fentanyl and passed away. We broke up a little over 5 years ago due to his addiction. I am not one who has ever or ever will use drugs, but sadly he fell down that path. We did not end things on a bad note. However, after years, 6 years to be exact, of attempting to help him get over his addiction, including but not limited to rehabs, clinics, therapists, support groups, etc., I could not take it anymore. I could not stand the lies. I could not stand the BS. Most of all, I could not stand watching him kill himself. It was his addiction that really helped me understand the famous saying, if you truly love someone, sometimes you have to let them go. That is exactly what happened. I was afraid I was enabling him by saying if things don't change, I would have to end things and not acting on it. A little background. Right before we broke up, I gave him an ultimatum, which was either make a real effort to change by leaving his triggers behind and work toward bettering himself emotionally, mentally, physically, and professionally, which I would support, or respect that this is not the life I want and it is time that we end things. He gave me the most honest answer any addict could give, which was, quote, I want to change, but I can't promise you I can, and I understand where you're coming from, and I will respect your wishes. As hard as it was to end things, we did. At this time, I was living 100 miles away from him because I was in college, and though he had a lot of his property in my apartment, he stayed with his parents because he had a bar job near their home, which really was where he could get drugs from. He drove down to have this conversation, but it was after midnight when he arrived. I asked him to take his cat home, gave him my ring, and said I would pack up his stuff and arrange for him to come pick it up. He agreed. We cuddled for about 30 minutes and talked a bit. He then grabbed his cat and left. One of the last things I told him before he left was to never let me get the call that he died. He laughed and told me that that would never happen. After that, I never saw him again. His mom called me a few days later and said he went to inpatient. She then stated she and his father would be coming down to grab his stuff when I was ready for them to do so. His family and I got along wonderfully, and we still do. So I was happy to have them come down, and we arranged for it to happen a couple weeks later. When they came down, I helped them move his items out. As I was loading their truck, his mom and I were talking, and she thanked me for everything, as well as reiterated that she did not blame me one bit for leaving. She prayed he would get clean and live a full life, to which I agreed. I told her I don't ever want to get back with him, but I want to see him live a happy life, and hoped that we can be best friends again one day. Time passed, and we both moved on. I met an incredible man at school who I am still with today. He met another sweet woman who he had a kid with. Sadly, they did not work out. However, he dated multiple sweet ladies, including the sweet lady he was with when he passed. I would periodically get texts from him over the years, and though I would reply, I was definitely not the talker between the two of us because I never wanted to give him the false hope that we would get back together. In addition, I would hear through the grapevine periodically that he was still using, which his pictures on social media supported because I could see it in his face and in his eyes. This is where things got weird. On Friday, December 16th, I got the call that I always feared. Our friend from Hawaii, where we lived for 4 of the 6 years we were together, called me to tell me that he overdosed and was in a coma. What was crazy was that I turned off my Facebook Messenger notice a few weeks earlier because I was getting so many notifications, yet before this call came in, his brother and sister-in-law tried to message me on there. I, of course, lost it. Our friend said he was flying out to stay with his family and go see him at the hospital, so I told him we will talk more when he gets here. The next day, our Hawaiian friend texted me to tell me he was coming in on Monday and said his mom said there was no sign of brain activity, but they had more tests to run. It was this night when things started to get weird. I woke up around 2:30 a.m. from a dead sleep and I felt him leave. It was a feeling I never felt before. I knew right then and there he was gone. I knew he was not coming back. The next day, I called a few other people who we knew in Hawaii that did not know what had happened to tell them that he was in a coma and we were not sure if he was going to make it. As I was talking to one of our other mutual friends, I suddenly felt like I was about to get that call that he was officially dead. Within 2 to 3 minutes, I had another call come in. It was my ex's brother-in-law. I answered and said, "Is this that call?" And he mumbled through his tears, "Yeah, I'm so sorry, sweetheart." I said, "Okay, thank you. I love you, bro." He told me that he loved me too, and we hung up. That night, I woke up at 3:30 a.m. from a dead sleep and heard his laughter clear as day in the living room. He had a very unique laugh that I could recognize anywhere. I could not go back to sleep. I was in tears. I knew he was there. Later that day, my boyfriend and I started to pack for a trip that we were getting ready to go on the following week for Christmas. My boyfriend had his Spotify on, and eventually it started to play random songs that were similar to his playlist. 3 of my favorite songs that my ex would play, since he was a musician, came on in a row. It tripped me out so much that I went and restarted the playlist midway through the 3rd song. The next day, I went to the store to grab a couple last-minute gifts and toiletries for our trip. As I was in the store, the same 3 songs that were played the day before, in the same order, mind you, started to play. When the 3rd song came on, I dropped my items and left. That night, I woke up from a dead sleep at 3:30 a.m., but this time, it was because I felt someone sitting on the end of my bed. I knew he was there. I did not go back to sleep. The next day, my boyfriend and I flew out for our holiday trip. We landed in Vegas because it was the closest airport to our destination. I had never been to Vegas, so we toured the Strip before departing to our destination. I was having so much fun and getting lost in life. Then guess what started playing in the casinos? The same 3 songs in the same order. I was completely freaked out. I could not believe it. Things settled for about a week, with the exception of waking up every night at 3:30 a.m. precisely. This time, though, I would not hear, sense, or see anything. I would just wake up. The day we were getting ready to head home, my boyfriend's brother was driving us to the airport, and guess what comes on the radio? The same 3 songs in the same order. By this point, I already accepted that it was him. His funeral was the day after we got home, which I went to. His family was happy to see me, and our friend from Hawaii was happy I was there, and many of our mutual friends were there as well. All in all, I was glad I went, but it was very hard. I had a couple of nights where I slept through the night, then he started to appear in my dreams. The first couple I shrugged off as my grief. The third time he appeared in my dream, I could not dismiss it as grief. He kept telling me that I needed to try hard cider with whiskey as we sat in a recording studio with 2 of our other friends who had passed years prior. I kept trying to tell a group outside of the room something through a loudspeaker, but kept getting interrupted by my ex and our other deceased friends. When I woke up, I could not stop thinking about the drink. I reached out to my friend from Hawaii who was staying on my ex's family's farm later in the day and asked him, without context, "Do you all have a thing with hard cider with whiskey?" He laughed and was like, "Yeah, bro, why?" This was not a thing I knew about, and it was definitely not a thing when my ex and I were together. So I was mind blown, but was like, okay. After this, I started to wake up every night at 3:30 a.m. until last night. Last night, I had the craziest dream of them all. My ex and I were in this random hotel room in Vegas talking. He then started to ask me about my current boyfriend, but not in a way that was uncomfortable, more like he wanted to know more. I told him how happy he and I were, and that I think we were the best thing that ever happened to each other. He smiled and told me he was happy for me, and that all he wanted was for me to be happy. He asked me if I would lay down and cuddle with him, though. I said I would, but not in a sexual way because it would not be fair to my boyfriend. He said okay, and so we did. He whispered in my ear and told me he will always love me, always be happy, never give up, and change the world. Then I woke up. Today has been rather crazy. I have been presented with 3 incredible opportunities out of the blue, 1 academic and 2 professional, all of which I'm considering and taking the next steps to apply for, and all of which would allow me to build on my life-saving research project. In addition, I got a random message on LinkedIn from someone asking me if my current employer is hiring, which I verified they are. I did not want to leave my current employer stranded when I moved on to bigger and better things. I cannot say if this was him or if it was all in my head, but somehow I feel a sense of peace. I know that he always cared for me and I always cared for him, but we were on 2 different paths in this world. I don't feel scared and I no longer feel alone. I have my best friend back. I have part of my old group back. They are just spirits, which I am totally okay with, and in other ways almost happier about because they are always there. I know some may dismiss this, but maybe my story will bring a sense of peace to others. Death is not the end. It is just another form of life. I do not understand it, but I do not fear it. All I know is that having my spirit homies is badass, and though it sucks that they died, I am glad that they are around me. Wow, that was a absolutely beautiful story. Probably one of my favorite ones that I've read so far in the show. You know, death is not easy for people to deal with. A lot of people see it as a permanent ending. However, this story might give people hope that, there is something more after this life. So our author had been dating this person, and this person was dealing with their demons in the form of drugs. Unfortunately, they ended up breaking up because of this after she tried to help him for a long time, and she ended up moving on and he ended up moving on, but he ended up passing away from his drug use, which is very sad. And the opioid epidemic is insane and definitely needs more attention, and people need more support because all that just say no stuff was BS at the time, and everybody knows that it is now. So it's a mental addiction. These people are sick and they need help and sympathy and support. So with that being said, after he passes away, she's upset, understandably so. However, she starts experiencing some supernatural occurrences in her life. So after her friend had called her and told her about her ex and how he had overdosed and was in the hospital in a coma, she woke up around 2:30 in the morning from a dead sleep and felt him leave. And it was a feeling that they had never felt before, and they knew right then and there that he was gone and not coming back. So the next day, she's calling a couple of their mutual friends to let them know what's going on, and they suddenly felt a feeling that they were about to get the call that he had officially passed. And within 2 to 3 minutes of her getting that feeling, she gets that call. That's another weird supernatural thing that happened. Then she wakes up at 3:30 a.m. from a dead sleep the next night and heard her ex's laugh as clear as day in the living room, which apparently he had a very distinct laugh that she could always recognize. And she could not get back to sleep after that, which makes a lot of sense. It's a very emotional experience. And she just knew that he was there. Later in the day, she's going on a trip with her boyfriend for Christmas vacation. And her boyfriend apparently had his Spotify on. And after a playlist ends on Spotify, they start playing songs that are pretty similar to songs that were in the playlist. And 3 of her ex's favorite songs that he would play since he was a musician came on in a row, which is very significant because she was freaked out, and that would not be the last time that happened. So then she goes the next day to get a couple last minute things for their trip, and the same 3 songs play. And she dropped her items and left because that's spooky. 3 songs being played in a row, what are the odds of that happening twice? Very low. I don't know the exact calculations for you, but very low. Then, same day that happened, woke up again from a dead sleep at 3:30 a.m., but this time it felt like someone was sitting on the end of the bed, and she assumed that it was her ex. So the next day, her and her current boyfriend flew out for their holiday trip. They were having so much fun, and they are in Vegas, and they decide to go to the casino, and what happens there? The same 3 songs in that same order. She freaks out, which I would too, I can't blame her. Then, every night after that, at 3:30 a.m. exactly, she would wake up. But this time, she wasn't really seeing any signs that it was her ex, but still, at the same time, is very weird. So then, the day that they're trying to go home, they're getting driven to the airport by their boyfriend's brother, and the same 3 songs in the same order play again. So that's the 4th time that that's happened, and that is not a coincidence. That is the ex. I don't know how they're doing that, but there's absolutely correlation. That there's no way that would happen 4 or 5 times. So after the funeral, she is having these dreams where she sees her ex. And initially she's chalking it up to the grieving process, which is a normal thing. And in one of these dreams, her ex tells her that she needs to try hard whiskey. In this dream, she's in this recording studio with her ex who passed away and 2 of her other friends who had passed on. What an emotional experience of a dream. When she wakes up, she calls a mutual friend and asked if her ex liked to drink hard cider with whiskey, because that was in the dream. The friend confirms it. So that's crazy. So there's a list of things that is happening here that are just all connected to this person trying to reach out in some way from whatever exists beyond this life. She has the craziest dream of them all, where her ex and her are in just this random hotel room, and they're talking, and he's asking her about her current boyfriend, not in a weird way, but just to see how everything's doing, make sure that she's good. They cuddle a little bit in just a nice, cute way. He whispered in her ear at the end that he'll always love her, that he wants her to always be happy, to never give up, and to change the world. And then she woke up. So after that last super real, raw, emotional dream, she gets presented with 3 incredible opportunities in her career. She says 1 of them are academic and 2 professional. So after all of this, there's all these signs, and there's finally this dream that's kind of one last major thing before is always going to be with her, but he's kind of saying his last goodbyes in the form of probably not going to be affecting the music or the dreams all the time, but that just letting her know that he will always be with her. And after that, she has these great things happen in her life. So there's definitely a correlation, and this was definitely an amazing story. So shout out to our author. Alrighty, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of Real Stories. This week you have heard, I encountered something evil with my father by user Stray. Then, it happened to me on a muddy trail while raining. A voice saved my life by Kate from Pennsylvania. And finally, he passed away a month ago and he now visits me all the time by Existing External 3362. All stories were read with the permission of their respective authors. And once again, for 10% off your first month of BetterHelp, go to betterhelp.com/realstories, all one word. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure that you leave a positive review if you liked it and tell a friend because that helps spread awareness of the podcast. And I will see you guys next week with a brand new episode. So stay safe.